I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different than everything else out there. I bring together a new and an experienced investor on each episode, and I let the aspiring investor ask the questions that they need answered. So if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably will have the exact same questions. Now, before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and that little bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show. Kelly, we got Savannah on the line. What do you want to ask her?
I wanted to ask you, Savannah, what do you see as the biggest obstacle for the nurses that you coach in their first deal?
So definitely the first thing is trust. Getting in front of your investors and raising capital is that trust piece, getting them to trust you and getting in front of the camera, getting on the Instagram, showing your face, having people hear you talk about real estate, seeing how you communicate about your deals, how you communicate about real estate as a whole, your profession.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. Very excited for today's show. We've got a repeat guest on here. We got Savannah Arroyo, and we also have Kelly Copeland with us today. So Savannah, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Stoked to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, and just for everybody listening, Savannah came on just over a year ago. She did a first deal episode, and it actually wasn't her first deal. I think she had done 2 or 3 when she came on, but she's now back in the expert seat. So Savannah, good to have you back.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe it's been a year.
Right. Yeah, it's been a while. So, and incidentally, I'm excited to see you in Dallas at the Dealmaker Live conference. This will probably air right after that conference is over, but it'll be good to see you and glad that you're going to be a speaker at that conference. So
yeah, definitely.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a registered nurse. My name's Savannah. I live in Los Angeles, California. I really kind of knew at a young age I wanted to go into nursing. So went right out of college into nursing school at Sacramento State University. Mm-hmm. Graduated, worked in a couple different specialties at a couple different hospitals, ended up going back to school and got my master's degree in nursing leadership and administration, just because I was really set on moving and advancing the corporate ladder within the healthcare system. Mm-hmm. And so transferred down to Los Angeles, California around 2015, and then started investing in real estate early 2020. That was when I had my second daughter. So after having my second daughter, my husband and I got together and got really specific on kind of how involved we want to be in our daughter's lives, mm-hmm. what income streams we want to bring in and to offset our W-2 income, because it was to the point where I was ending my 3-month maternity leave and getting ready to hand over my 3-month-old baby to a daycare, mm-hmm. My daycare lady. And it was a really pivotal moment of like, we need to figure out a different way to build wealth besides our retirement account, because we couldn't touch it until we're 60s. Started researching ways to build wealth and invest and create additional income streams, and stumbled upon real estate for obvious reasons. It's one mm-hmm. of the best strategies out there. So started investing, got 2 long-term rentals over in Atlanta, Georgia. And then after that, we're like, all right, what's next? How do we scale? Like, how do we do this? And we didn't have any money to mm-hmm. start investing. So even to buy those 2 long-term rentals, we pulled from our home equity to buy those, and then started getting into real estate syndication, started learning that you could use and pool together other people's money to go out and buy assets that you couldn't normally buy on your own, and acquired, we're closing on our 4th apartment deal this Friday. And those have been, primarily up in Oregon. I run this business with my husband. Mm-hmm. We are general partners on our deals and kind of split up the business that way. And it kind of launched my brand, Net Worth Nurse, mm-hmm. to raise money for syndications. And then as I've started building that brand, it's really evolved based on kind of what the needs are of nurses and healthcare professionals. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of an intro into everything I've been doing in the space.
Awesome. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is your brand, because I think it's super catchy. And it's funny, I knew you as the Net Worth Nurse before I knew you as Savannah. And that was, I saw a lot of what you were doing, a lot of what you were posting. It's extremely catchy. But Let's dial back to that. What was going through your mind when you started that brand, the Net Worth Nurse?
Yeah. So when we raised for our first deal, it was a 12 unit, $1 million property. We raised $250,000 for that. We invested in it as well. And we started going to friends and family. We have zero real estate background. None of our friends and family are in real estate. And so we were sending out feelers with our sample deal deck and did it, maybe send it to 35 people on our email list, family and friends. And, we got back about 5 emails, three of those people ended up investing. And so after we did that deal, we're like, wow, we really exhausted our internal network. We're going to have to figure out a way to reach more people to raise capital for these deals. And originally, my husband and I have zero sales background, marketing. I mean, we didn't want to be the face of a company in a way of getting money for these deals. It was really out of my comfort zone initially. And so we were looking to partner with capital raisers to continue doing deals. And then as we started having those conversations, we realized that to establish a noteworthy real estate business, that we needed to be in front of the camera and show people who we were to establish that trust. And so I wanted to do it in the most genuine way possible, which was me coming in as a nurse, talking to other nurses and healthcare professionals about what this is, what real estate syndications are, how you can invest in them, what the returns look like, how you can use this strategy to grow your wealth. And so that was the launch of Net Worth Nurse, really as a way to have a foundation for investors to come and learn about syndication. So anytime I'd hop on a call with a potential investor or go to the hospital and talk to nurses and doctors about it, I'd get the same questions over and over. What do the returns look like? What's the process of a real estate syndication? What is the legal documents? Like, what's the timeline aspect? And so every time I'd get multiple questions, I would write a blog, I would do a YouTube video, I would post it onto the Net Worth Nurse site. And so as I would continue having investor calls, if I'd get the repeat questions, I'd say, oh, head over to my site. Or a lot of times they could get a lot of this information before I hopped on the phone call with them. So really used it as a hub for education and information about real estate syndications. And then as I was building it and getting more feedback from nurses, especially on social media and sharing everything I was doing, I've been very transparent about every step of the process on how I'm acquiring and building scaling my real estate portfolio. I received a lot of feedback from nurses of they were missing basic financial information, how to pay off student loans debt. What's the difference between a 401k and an IRA account? What does it mean what's cash flow? What is that? How's that calculated? And so we really started creating a more financial literacy, personal finance. And so we have evolved Net Worth Nurse into 3 pillars, real estate, personal finance, and career growth to really help nurses at all stages to grow wealth. So it's really evolved, but it still serves as a great capital raising platform.
I think it's a really well set up brand. And what you put on Instagram, that's where I mainly see it, is on Instagram. But the stuff that I see on there, it looks like it's extremely relevant to nurses. It looks like you have a pretty good combination of day in the life of a nurse plus, the financial education stuff as well, which I think is a really good mix because, I don't think people want to be bombarded all the time about the financial stuff, but you have some really catchy, this happened to me today, or this is what it's like as a nurse. And I'm not a nurse, but I still smile every time imagining, a lot of stuff that you say in there. But anyway, great job on that brand. And if you don't mind, we'll put links to your websites in the show notes. And that way people can check it out. So something very related to what we're talking about, you talk about giving back, you talk about, educating nurses. I'd like to talk to everybody about their motivations, what I call their big burning why. What is your big burning why?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely evolved. Initially it was after having my second daughter, looking for a way to create generational wealth for our family and more time freedom that we could enjoy together as a family. Being able to have the flexibility to take them to swim lessons and soccer practice and dance and be able to take time off work and go places with the family and spend time together. And so it really started there, which was super important, especially as my husband and I had been building this business together, that we were very much much on the same page of what those goals looked like and what that vision was for our business. And for us, I mean, it was taking a look at where do we want to be financially in 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, and what steps do we need to get to that point? And it was very specific of like, what dollar amount do we need to be bringing in on a monthly basis to meet our lifestyle goals that we want for our family? And then kind of working backwards of like, okay, well, we need to do this many deals to get to that point. We need to underwrite this many different properties. We need to talk to this many different brokers. We need to talk to this many different investors. And so that was really our big burning why with our family. But then as I've launched Net Worth Nurse and started connecting with so many healthcare professionals and also serving as a healthcare leader throughout the pandemic and seeing what that has done for healthcare professionals all over, it has been very eye-opening into the lack of financial education for nurses. And it is such a disadvantage, especially here in California with high income earners, medical professionals here, they're still living paycheck to paycheck. They're still hit so hard by the COVID pandemic and in these almost golden handcuffs, they call them in the medical field, of just being tied to a high salary and not having another way to create wealth. And so now my huge passion is just educating as many healthcare professionals on real estate and what real estate investing looks like, what it did for my life and the freedom that it's allowed me. I mean, I was able to walk away from my full-time $150,000 nursing salary, 18 months after I started investing in real estate, because the income that I was receiving from my real estate investment offsetting what I was getting at my job. And to take into consideration that the tax benefits are huge. I was making $150K, only bringing in like $6K a month, and so to me, it was like, I just need to get $6,000 a month from my real estate portfolio to leave that full-time job, because it's not taxed the same. And that's a huge difference in this space. And so that has evolved my big burning why.
Yeah, I hope the IRS doesn't hear this, but I haven't paid federal tax ever since my first investment property, to be honest with you. I mean,
you're doing it right.
It kind of helps that I have 5 kids, but 2 of them are too old to qualify for that tax credit. But it is not taxed the same. I think that's a huge benefit. That, and I'm glad you brought that up, because you need less income from real estate than you would from a W-2 because of the tax benefits. And I assume now that you've left your W-2 that you also qualify as a real estate professional, which makes the tax benefits even better for you.
Yes. Yeah. This was 2021 was the first time I qualified as a full-time real estate professional. So I left my job in October. I'm still working 1 day a week at the hospital. I wasn't ready to give up nursing completely. It's a huge passion of mine, but I received a $31,000 check back from the IRS. They took back all those tax withholdings that they took for all of 2021. They sent me a check last week, $31,000 of that back, because all of our real estate showed a loss because we did cost segregations and depreciation studies and all of our assets. So that
I was worried in 2020 because I did not qualify as a real estate professional, but even with the depreciation and everything else that came from a lot of the real estate, the benefits of real estate income, I still was able to zero out my taxes. And then I haven't done my 2021 taxes yet. I did file for the extension, but
it is May.
It is May, but I still haven't gotten all my K1s back, which is crazy. Some people are good at getting K1s back. Some people aren't, but anyway, once I get my last K1, I'll file the taxes, but I'm expecting to zero out my federal taxes this year as well. States are always a different subject, but we'll talk about taxes later. But so let's talk about one of the properties you've done, and I usually say pick your favorite or most recent. But you've already come on the podcast and talked about the first. So let's pick one of the more recent ones and give us an idea of what a typical, Savannah Arroyo investment looks like. So
we're actually closing on our 4th deal this week. It's 36 units. So I'll kind of talk about that one. Up until this point, I've done a 12 unit. About 6 months later, did a 24 unit. Then a few months after that, a 18 unit. and now this will be a 36 unit. So we've kind of scaled slowly. How we've kind of even looked at price points for it, it's kind of determined on how much capital I have raised at a given point. So kind of taking note of my conversations with investors and keeping track of how much capital I've raised. So for this last deal, I knew, okay, I had about $1 million raised from conversations with investors. And so we were out looking for properties to in that range. So we got a $4.5 million property up in Monmouth, Oregon. It's right outside Salem, Oregon, the capital. Really like 3% vacancy rates in the market, huge, strong rental demand, added value opportunity because rents are well below market. The seller had owned it for like 40 plus years, completely outright. But he passed last year, and then his wife ended up passing right after. And so his kids were just selling it and looking for kind of a different, more like Class A asset, a lot less time commitment for them. And so we came in at this opportunity, huge opportunity. We love value add deals. So we're acquiring this property, looking to raise rents. And then there was something with the laundry in this building that they had a team come in and they're taking 50% of the laundry income. It's just not the best business plan. So we're recapturing all that laundry income. That's kind of a way that we're adding value to the opportunity. But this is going to be a 5-year hold. We're looking at, on average 7 to 9% cash on cash for our investors, 20% average annualized return. Nice. I think about 16% IRR. So like a 103% ROI for investors at 5 years. So we're really excited about this one. We did have to bring in a KP on this deal because my husband and I don't meet the net worth liquidity requirements. So we brought on a KP who we've actually met through the multifamily network and just kind of someone we've networked with over the years. That's kind of the outside structure of that deal.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I want to point out that I think is smart. And I talk with a lot of aspiring investors. Obviously, that's kind of what I do on the podcast. But I think one of the common mistakes that investors have going in, or new investors have going in, is they try to reach too high. They don't let the amount of capital they can raise and bring to the table inform their deal size or their deal criteria. And I really like what you've done is you've come down to you talk with people, you get the soft commits, you keep track of it. You have an idea of how much money you can raise before you're looking for deals or as you're looking for deals, which I would imagine makes the whole process a lot simpler than getting a deal under contract and then saying, wow, now I've got to raise $1 million. How am I going to do that? And I think I see the second version a lot more. But so number one, I think that's amazing. And then number two, I just wanted to explain, you use the word KP, just in case people don't understand that. When you get a property, you have to have, or when you get a loan, you have to have net worth and you have to have experience. The net worth has to be, as Savannah said, the net worth has to be about the size of the purchase price, right? So if you don't meet the net worth requirements, you have to have somebody on your team that can help you with the balance sheet. So very, very common, even for experienced investors, to have to bring in a KP to help with that net worth, if that makes sense. But I assume you checked all the boxes as far as experience goes, being your fourth loan. So anyway, thanks for that. Very much appreciate that. Last question for you. What's next for you?
So a lot of things. We are 1031ing our long-term rentals over in Atlanta, Georgia, and converting them into short-term rentals. So we're jumping into the short-term rental space. Got a bunch of friends, a lot of healthcare professionals that are big in that. And so I've been learning about that strategy. Might potentially do a midterm rental with it and put travel nurses in it. Haven't really decided. We're looking at a 5-unit up in Oregon right now that we might try and do a midterm rental with, like potentially furnish it and have travelers in there. So that drastically helps the cash flow drastically in regards to the comparison between long-term tenants and the short-term tenants. So that's kind of in the works there. We're still working through that. We're about two weeks into our 1031. So we're going to have to start making a decision fairly soon on that. And then also trying to work through the lending as interest rates have drastically risen over the last couple months. So now trying to see how we can incorporate a deal that still cash flows like we want. So working on that. We'll probably do one more syndication by the end of the year. This was a pretty big deal, capital raising. This was our first time doing agency debt. So it was about a 5-month from when we went under contract to close, which has been very exhausting with the agency debt piece. I did not really know what to expect with that. I mean, my husband has reformatted, I think, every piece of financial rent roll P&L to meet the criteria for Freddie Mac. And it's been a little exhausting. So we will probably do one more by the end of the year. And then a huge shift in my focus has been on Net Worth Nurse and really trying to build that brand to cater to nurses and healthcare professionals in the best way possible. And we've gotten to a point where I think that involves some technology. So we're looking into the tech startup space, which is like me entering a real estate space all over and trying to relearn all these new terms in the tech startup space. I'm going to tech startup networking events, having lunch and coffee with people in the tech startup space, nurse entrepreneurs, nurse CEOs who are running businesses. And so I'm really looking to build Net Worth out to serve healthcare professionals everywhere and get them invested in real estate.
Yeah, nice. When you said you have a lot of things coming up, you weren't kidding. So, short-term rentals, adding tech to your Net Worth Nurse and continuing to syndicate. So, amazing, awesome. Well, look forward to seeing the future, what the future holds for you, and I expect great things from you. So, going to be fun watching. With that said, we're going to shift gears and welcome Kelly. So, Kelly, welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, how you doing, Brian?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm well.
Good. Well, let's talk about you for a second. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am new to the multifamily investing space. Like most of us, I started out in the single family space, and me and my partner, Courtney Clark, we were wholesalers, and we wholesaled for about 2 years, primarily in South Texas market, Houston, Beaumont, Port Arthur area, Tyler, Texas, East Texas. I'm born and raised in Texas, so that market and the areas were very familiar to me.
Yep.
I come from a very strong customer service background. For 20 plus years, I was in flight services for a Fortune 500 airline. And that taught me customer first and work from that position. And I view my investors and sellers and brokers all as customers. And that helped me in the single family space. And I've transitioned that to the multifamily space. We just have built out an amazing team in the last 60 days in the multifamily. And now we're just looking to take down BGPs and take down our first syndication deal.
Nice. So you and your partner have been doing some very similar things. There's a lot of similarities between wholesaling and buying multifamily. So you're basically just doing a slight shift in direction instead of a brand new start over. Is what it sounds like. Awesome. Well, that's awesome. So one thing I ask everybody on this and trying to peer into your soul a little bit, what motivates you? What's your big burning why?
Brian, my big burning why, and I hear this repeated over and over in the space. Samantha said some things, and in having conversations with you, there's definitely some overlap to my burning why. But the biggest thing is I have 6 children, and just spending time with them and the freedom of time and being able to teach them about general wealth and moving from that employee mindset to that owner mindset is huge. And I must say, in my community, it's a new learn. My parents were very much find a good job, work hard, move up, but you're always in that mentality, that employee mentality. And as long as you stay there, your ability to earn is going to be limited. And I'm just trying 50 plus. I'm not going to tell you exactly what, but I'm 50 plus. And I'm trying to I've made that mindset shift. It wasn't easy. Now that I've taught my kids the same thing, go to college, get a degree, get a job, move up. And now my big burning is being able to shift their mindset and be able to bring them out of that employee mindset and educate people around me, my community, about the multifamily game and how lucrative it can be, all the advantages that are there, and that it is possible. And you don't have to just live in these apartments. You can actually own these apartments and cash flow these apartments. So that's my big burning one.
Yeah, love it. I love it. Yeah. So I think I grew up with the W-2 mentality, and Savannah, you alluded to it as well, where you got your master's degree to climb that corporate ladder. And I think that's a very common thread that I see on the podcast is, people learn that is one way of doing things. It's not may not be the best way for everybody, but anyway, hopefully you can, reach your goals and start tackling these large multifamily properties. But that said, Kelly, we got Savannah on the line. What do you want to ask her?
Hey, Savannah.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, Savannah, first of all, what do you see as the biggest obstacle and pitfall for the nurses that you coach in their first deal? What do you see the biggest obstacles they have to overcome, and the pitfalls that you see over and over again that you're coaching them through?
So definitely the first thing is trust. And even getting in front of your investors and raising capital is that trust piece, getting them to trust you. And so that was why when I launched my brand, I made it a point to, even though it was extremely uncomfortable and is still uncomfortable, not as much now, but, getting in front of the camera, getting on the Instagram, showing your face, having people hear you talk about real estate, seeing how you communicate about your deals, how you communicate about real estate as a whole, your profession, how you communicate about your partners. And so that was a big hurdle for me of producing content where I'm in front of the camera and building that trust. And then I've noticed, after doing that, I have almost this built-in trust with healthcare professionals. If they're finding me from a social media outlet and they've been following me, or if they've seen some of my content, they have a good idea of who I am and kind of what I'm doing. And so then really the next gap that I would say would be really basic understanding of the process of really what cash flows is, what returns are, what are the implications come tax time. And so that was a big thing of what I was kind of mentioning earlier in the podcast of creating kind of that hub and foundation of these resources. And so, a big thing that I did early on in syndication was I created a doodle video, like one of those doodle videos where someone sketches out, and I didn't create it. I'm not, as I'm going into the tech space, I'm not very tech savvy, but I hired someone on Fiverr to create this for me. I wrote a script on how I wanted it to look like. So I paid someone on Fiverr, I think $100, and I get compliments on this video so much. I've had other capital raisers reach out to me asking if they could duplicate it type thing, because it's a 3-minute video that literally draws out, okay, this is what a syndication, this is how it works, this is how it's divided, this is what the timeline looks like. And I really try and get all my investors to watch that before I hop on a call with them, so they have a basic understanding of how a syndication works. I think that's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah. Savannah, I'm asking you now, do you mind if I use that? Because that sounds wonderful.
I will get you the Fiverr guy. He did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And this goes out to Brian and Savannah. We're potentially coming to a change in the market. We're shifting from the seller's market, possibly to the buyer's market. Is there anything you're doing differently? Are you underwriting more conservatively? Are you more selective with the assets you're pursuing? How can I combat the rising interest rates and still get deals to cash flow?
Yeah. So for us on this, we started investing in the pandemic, like March 2020 was when we started getting into it. And so as we were underwriting deals and binging podcasts and listening to people, it was like, how are you guys going to try and raise money during a pandemic, type thing. And so for us, it's always been conservative underwriting. And I know, Brian, for your team and the deals you guys have done always through Forex Capital, I've seen your guys' deal. Conservative underwriting is huge for you guys as well. And it just always pays off, always running the numbers in a worst case scenario so conservatively that you can kind of mitigate a lot of that risk that comes, that unpredictability of like, we don't know what's going to happen with the COVID and the pandemic, but we're showing our numbers of like, we're going to hope to raise it 9.1% rent year after year, but we're going to underwrite it at that 4%, just to be conservative. And we've gone out and raised our rents 9.1% even throughout the pandemic. So there's a huge curve there. So underwriting conservatively. And then I think for us, in terms of finding deals with the climbing interest rates that work for us and get the returns for our investors, it's really relying on our network and our relationships, and relying on our broker who we've done all 4 deals with, the same broker, of relying on our relationships and finding people who do have good deals, because they're out there. It kind of just takes a little bit of networking and relationship building to get there. And a lot of times, brokers or people want to see kind of a track record. So I think even for you, Kelly, like your experience in wholesaling is huge. Long-term rentals. I mean, even if it's not multifamily, it's still big. It still plays a role in your experience. So relying on relationships to get us our deal flow has been big.
Yeah. I would add, I mean, right now we've seen rates tick up a little bit, but historically we're still at really, really low rates. I mean, we can still get, I talked to somebody earlier today who was getting a 2.8% loan still today. I mean, much different situation, but when you're looking at the Fannies and the Freddies right now, they're still high 4s, maybe low 5s. Savannah, where did you lock your debt in on the one you're closing?
4.5.
4.5.
But we were underwriting it at like 3.6. So when we got to lock it at 4.5, it was a hit, but it was still better than, where it's going. So,
So with rising rates, when I started investing, we were underwriting everything at 5.25 because that's where rates were. This was like late 2018, agencies were given about 5.25. And, I've got a couple of loans that are high 4s, a couple of loans that are high 5s. And when we started doing it, it was so when we got our first property under contract, we had this inverted yield curve thing. This was 2019, and everyone was talking about recessions, and so really, I go back to the fundamentals. Every time I have doubts about the future, I go back to the fundamentals of real estate. Has real estate been a really good investment for the last 100 years? Yes, is the answer. Is real estate still going to be a good investment for the next 100 years? And I think yes is still the answer. So when I look at that, there are little fluctuations here and there. Rates go up or rates go down. Pendulum swings between a buyer's market and a seller's market. But, I go back to a Warren Buffett quote. Warren Buffett once said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. And he says the same thing about investing, and if that's probably not Warren Buffett. I probably screwed that up, but the idea is the same. I still think it's a good time to buy real estate. And what Savannah said about conservative underwriting, I wholeheartedly agree on. You have to be fairly conservative with your projections, but try to be as realistic as possible. It's that fine line between, here's where the market is today, here's where we think we can go. But the other thing I'll mention is, with 8% inflation, a 5% interest rate is like the bank paying you to take money. So I think there's still a lot of goodness here. I think there's still a lot of good reasons to buy. It does make you have to look twice at the numbers, but I am hoping that the pendulum does shift from a seller's market to a buyer's market because I'm ready to pounce.
Savannah, I also wanted to ask you, and you mentioned a little bit about deal flow, being new to the space. What can you tell me to help out our deal flow? And I'm mostly interested about the deal that you just sourced from the couple who passed, and then their kids had it. How did you source that deal? Did that come from direct to owner? Did that come through a broker? And how can we help our deal flow? We know we got the broker piece and we're calling up and anything, but for newbies, is there anything you can suggest extra to help our deal flow? And how did you source that deal you spoke of in Oregon?
Yeah, deal flow is very difficult as a new investor. And I think even when we got started, I remember calling about 50 brokers and some of them asking, how many units do you have? How many, like where was your last, where are you invested? And them asking these questions that allude to experience that I didn't have. And it was just, no calls back after that. Because, they have a line of investors that are waiting for deals. And if they don't know that you can take a deal to the finish line, they don't know, necessarily. And so it took a lot of calls. I mean, I think when we first got started, we probably talked to like 50 brokers, and then conveniently got one up in Oregon. We saw a deal on LoopNet where deals go to die, and it looked decent. And so we reached out to the broker. Young Marcus and Millichap, very hungry, new to the space. We were very specific on unit count, what we were looking for, purchase price. And because I think we were so specific on what we were looking for, what sub market, like we were looking for $1 to $1.5 million, 12 to 20 units, strong value add, these submarkets. We were so specific that I think the broker thought we were experienced, and it took going through that whole deal, closing it, and us telling him, oh, that was our first deal type thing, or it got brought up. And he was like, what? It was, I had no idea. And then he sent us 2 deals after that within 6 months that we went through and closed on. And then he sent us this current deal that we're doing, the 36 unit. So that is something that he sent to us.
Nice. Very nice. Mm-hmm. Very, very nice.
I'll point out the young brokers are doing the same thing in their industry as the young syndicators are. They're trying to make a name for themselves. They're trying to build their list of owners. They don't care too much about buyers. They care about the owners because that's what gets them the listings. But owners are also buyers in most cases. So most people are going to get traction with the younger brokers because they're trying to build that list. And if you can help them and be one of their owners, their hope is that when you sell that property, you're going to list it with them. So newer brokers, best way to go.
Right. I just have one more question for you, Savannah. I looked over your bio. I looked at your LinkedIn. I know everything about you now. That's online. And it was very impressive. And when you're talking, when you're doing capital raising, you mentioned in the bio giving the amazing benefits of investing in real estate. And I just wanted you to talk, if you could talk to me briefly about the top 3. I know the taxes are there. You mentioned the taxes. Brian has mentioned the taxes. Benefits, but what has resonated the most with your investors? What are the top 3 benefits that for a lay person that seems to make it click where they want to invest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And creeping skills on social media, it's literally a skill these days. So kudos to you for doing that. I do it all the time. So for me, I think the biggest, taxes is big, but most of my healthcare professionals are working full-time and they're not claiming that full-time real estate professional. So they don't necessarily get a lot of the tax benefits necessarily. Sometimes there's different things where if their spouse can claim it and they're filing jointly, then I kind of talk through what that scenario might look like. But again, there's only so much tax advice you can give, right? I mean, you really can't give that much. You really want to defer them over to their CPA, let them know that they're looking to invest in a syndication to see how they can kind of work their tax filing to kind of accommodate that and receive the most benefits. And so that's kind of where I direct people there with the tax stuff. But cash flow is big, looking for a very passive approach. My healthcare professionals are busy working in the hospital. They're busy working in healthcare. And so they're just looking for a way. I mean, the majority of them that are investing have that chunk of capital, not knowing what to do with it. Most of them are like sitting it in a savings account, which is like the worst thing you can do, right? Especially with inflation right now. And so my biggest conversation with them is like, okay, you have money sitting in a savings account, like a big chunk of money. What is that doing? Look at this inflation rate. You're losing money to the dollar on that. If you put it in this asset that now is working for you, putting your money to work for you, you can receive this passive income. So it's a big mindset shift, which you've already mentioned in this podcast of like, what does that look like to divert that money from savings where they really think it's safe? People think their money sitting in a savings account is safe. And it takes a huge huge piece of like kind of education and a mindset shift to show them that it's not safe sitting in a savings account. Although right now it's a good time to have cash because, stocks are low and all that. So we could dive into all of that, but that's kind of why my biggest talking point is looking at where their money's sitting at right now and where we can move it. So it's, going to work to the biggest advantage for them. So that piece. And then also a lot of nurses converting, like a lot of them have IRA accounts that they aren't doing anything with. So helping them to potentially convert it into a self-directed IRA. Again, there's a lot of different things that you have to take into consideration when you're doing that with investors. So it's a big education piece. And then I work with some custodians that are really good because most nurses work a bunch of different jobs and they have 401ks that are just sitting there. They're not doing anything with them. They don't know with a click of a button, you can convert it into a rollover IRA, and then you can convert it into a self-directed IRA. So having conversations with healthcare professionals around that is usually a big talking point as well.
Yeah, I agree. Now we are about out of time. So we are going to wrap things up with one final question to each of you. Savannah, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, Net Worth Nurse. So my website's networthnurse.co. On there, I have everything you could ever need for real estate investing and healthcare professionals. Although I speak primarily to nurses and healthcare professionals, anyone can invest in our deals. And it's a lot of basic information that's catered to everyone. But networthnurse.co, and I'm on all social media. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. You can find me on all those either under Net Worth Nurse or The Net Worth Nurse or Savannah Arroyo.
Perfect. All right. And Kelly, same question for you.
You can always see me on my website, alliancecapitalinvesting.com. And I am on Instagram, not quite as on social media as good as Savannah, but I'm starting. You can find me at Kelly the Investor.
All right. Awesome. And we're going to put links to those in the show notes just to make sure everybody can find it if you're interested in catching up with these guys. All right. So once again, thanks again for coming on the show today. And I appreciate your guys' time today.
Savannah, thank you. Brian, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, if you like that episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community, the Tribe of Titans yet, you are missing out. So get yourself 30 days free by clicking the link below in the description or go to thetribeoftitans.info and we'll see you there.